Hopefully. Okay. All right. I think we're good. And we're live. Hello. I'll let people filter in. I did link everybody's channels down below, but if you guys want to go ahead and go in a circle and introduce and share where people can find you on the internet. So if you want to go ahead and start, Thor, you can go.
Okay. You guys can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Honey Weshte. My name is Michelle from Thor Wants Another Letter, or you can call me Thor. Um, and then, okay. Uh, you can find me on any of this stuff. You just look up Thor Wants Another Letter. I have nothing going on right now, so December's free.
Hi, I'm Jess. On YouTube, my channel is under Jess Owens. But on Twitter and Instagram, it's said by Jess. I just talk about nonsense and some pictures of my dog Nigel, but currently lusting over Lan from the Wheel of Time adaptation. But that's not important.
Same.
I'll go ahead and mute
Same.
myself.
Same.
Me? Okay. Hello, I'm Amber from Amber Dior here on YouTube. That's my name. But on Instagram, I feel like I'm yelling. I'm sorry. I'm stopping
you're
Slow
good.
Pages on Instagram. I also have a bookish candle company, Sid Lear. I think that's it.
I can confirm that Amber's candles are so good. So good.
Thank you.
One of them really made my house smell like I had just made sugar cookies, but I don't bake anymore. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. All right, Kim, you go.
Hi everyone, Lumak Talong ba? My name is Kim or Sapovi, and my channel is Native Lady Bookwire. I'm Hopi Tewa and Satoa or Tobacco Clan from the village of Tewa on the Hopi Nation. So yeah, you can find me on Instagram, same name, Native Lady Bookwire. I'm on Twitter, but mainly I'm just there to like fish out what's happening in the book community, being the nosy, like, dang, this is what's happening. So yeah, and then mostly I review and read indigenous authored lit. I really like nonfiction and horror, and but pretty much anything authored by an indigenous author I love, or I'll read. And of course, I mainly try to prioritize BIPOC reads. So yeah.
Thank you all for being here. I super appreciate it. So instead of giving me like your rating, I'd really like to go around and have everybody say what their reading experience was with this book, because I feel like this is kind of unlike anything else that I've ever read. I'm not sure if you all had the same experience, but I'd like to know what your reading experience was like if you want to sum it up in a couple sentences. Thor, you can go.
I would say this was very deep. I started this in like July, and then I put it down for a while, and so then when I came back, I already had 100 pages. So I was just kind of like looking through things. But this was really deep, and it didn't like take a lot out of me per se, but it was just a very emotional and something that like certain parts of this book that I relate to, and like like feel in my soul kind of things. But I really enjoyed it.
Yes, I can feel that with a feel in my soul. Well, let me hold this book because it's so beautiful. I was kind of prepared from hearing Mara talk about it that it was, because I feel like, yay! I mean, one of the most beautiful covers ever.
Yes.
You can kind of be maybe thrown and think maybe it's a little lighter. I don't know, because it has, just a bright, fun cover. So I was kind of prepared that it was more serious. but I found myself relating to a lot of things, even though I'm not Indigenous, and then just being like, oh, we're going there. And so a lot of moments like, oh my goodness. I read this originally a few months ago, but I was re-listening to the audiobook and I was like, ooh, like remember, coming back up on things that I had read, and they still hurt the second time.
Yeah.
And there was just a lot of feels of just appreciation, because I just love how I don't know, real it felt even to me as a non-Indigenous reader, and I just loved my experience reading it.
Yeah, definitely agree. This was such a roller coaster for me. I read it for the first time like 2 weeks ago, and I'll just summarize by saying there was a point where my mom said to me, "You might not be able to finish this book because you're getting on my nerves." Because it was just me yelling and then like crying and just go. And I'm like, who else can I talk to? I know you have no idea what I'm talking about, but like, listen to me. I'm going through it right now.
That is so relatable. I remember crying last night rereading it and just being like, if I have to explain the whole thing to my husband, it'll take an hour, so I'll just cry by myself, I guess.
I'm like, you don't understand. Oh.
Yeah, I think for me, this is like my third time reading it. I read it the first time when it first came out, and I am glad I've actually read some other books before I read this one, including Hood Feminism. I'm very glad I read Bad Fat Black Girl before this, and then also A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott, because she does discuss
Yes.
sexual assault and how it affects Indigenous communities and Indigenous women. So I felt like happy I kind of read other nonfiction pieces before I read this one, because it gave me more context. And but just like what Amber said, it was such a roller coaster to be going from Indigenous joy to like thriller moments to romance, which I didn't like, and then also just all of the res politics. Holy crap, like identity. She threw like the whole kitchen sink at us, I think.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you probably didn't weren't raised on a reservation, or don't, maybe you're really connected to your res, or you are you understand the different prejudices and the injustices, even though by your own community is in here. So it's kind of a lot. And then of course, um I think what the author does really, really well is she kind of interweaves very sneakily, because you don't see it until like really slams you in the face until a little bit at like maybe midway, is the that uh women of color, especially when it comes to justice, are not a priority within the United States. And
Yeah.
that is just an unfortunate, realistic fact, unfortunately, and especially with Indigenous communities. Because I forgot that this takes place like what, 2004, because they were talking about the razor phone, and I'm like, oh my god, my mom had a razor phone. So I'm like, what? They're talking about a razor phone? And I remember when they were talking about how they charge per text, because I would be coming home on that varsity bus, and it's like they would dump me and my brother off, because we both played varsity ball at the dirt road or the main road. And then we would have to walk 2 miles in the freaking dark. There's no street lights. Like, there's sometimes we'd be like, and run into a bush. But we didn't have a cell phone. We couldn't call our mom to say, hey, come pick us up. And when we did, we were stupid teenagers in high school. So we'd be wasting minutes on our people we liked and that we were talking to, So we'd be like,
Yep.
damn, we got no more text messages left to tell someone to pick us up. What the heck? Dang. So my brother, we'd just be walking back. But yeah, and I think just the humor was stellar. Just like I remember, like, yeah, you make sure tribal council's all there at my funeral so they can let me down one more time. And I was like, dang, grandma got some. And I actually heard that joke before, like a while back. That's such an old joke. Or how she names her dog tribal council. But just like what Amber said, it's just a roller coaster. And I feel like she's trying to put so much in here. And my daughters also read this. One is 17 now. The other one is 13. And they were saying, like, that wouldn't it be awesome, Mom, if they turned this into like a Danny saga or Donis saga? And I was like, yeah, it would. Like if they followed her to college and all this stuff. And I was just like, yeah, it would be very cool. But yeah, I think that's just okay. I'm done now. I don't need to talk anymore. So I already talked about the whole book.
I'm glad you brought up the humor because it reminded me of my favorite humorous part is where one of the elders, she's talking to him and she's like, what about your diabetes? And he goes, I'm not a diabetic. I'm a Presbyterian. I love that part. And she's like, he's not even Presbyterian. He's Catholic. All right, let me go through comments real quick because I have one.
Oh, she erased herself. Comments and I'm out.
That's my bad. Instead of clicking up, I hit back. So, yep. I don't work in IT. My husband does. Okay. Thank you all for being here. Hello. Hi. Totally fine to be here if you haven't read the book, but yes, there will be spoilers. Hi, Ray.
Also, I was like the other day years old when I realized the difference in skin tone.
Yes, I love how much meaning there is in this cover. Whoever created this really put their all into creating this cover. I hope they're having the best day.
Well, it shows if you have the hardcover, it shows at the bottom of the flap, like the jacket art and design.
Oh, wow. The way I had no idea. That's a thing? A regular thing?
I discovered that like last week when I was looking at a children's
Look at us all learning, because I surely didn't know.
Do we even read books?
No.
I just look at them.
I remember when I did the book haul for this and I was like screaming, no, because there's
I know.
Oh my God.
I was like,
Reese,
why?
I'm glad this was your pick, but
I was spoiled. I got it sent from the publisher.
I got it from Book of the Month, so I didn't get the Reese sticker, and I am very glad because that is ridiculous.
I just love it. It's all textured, and I love it. It's
oily too.
Yours is signed?
Yep.
That's awesome.
Kim just beat all of us.
Birch Bark Books. A lot of their books, if you're looking for Indigenous authored books, and it's like maybe just coming out, I know a lot of their books like are signed. So
that's awesome. Yeah, the romance. We are going to talk about that.
Odd is a word.
Yeah,
it is.
Let's just erase it.
I was asking friends from the same res as the author if they knew anyone that put the description of not you snooping. Let's see. Grandma was the best.
Yes.
That is accurate.
Love her.
I think the supporting characters were just all amazing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I felt like the way the author resolved the romance made me more okay with it. What I found more difficult to accept is the resolution to the mystery. Yeah, we're going to talk about both those things because feelings. So I guess let's start with Jamie. Jamie Johnson, alias, of course. How did we feel about little Jamie? Just go in a circle. Tell me all your feelings. Or anybody can go.
My brother would punch him in the face if that was me.
That is
Like,
a
he
feeling.
just, I mean, I liked him to a degree. Like, he really needed to find out who he is, but at the same time, like, he was just a little bit full of himself.
Yeah. Because, I mean, he was older than Donis, but he still's a baby, really. He's still young and, like, obviously doesn't know who he is, like, really, like, you know, his history, his tribe, any of that. And just, like, I think the full of himself because he's like, is this, like, cop and all of this stuff? And it's so funny because when I first read it, I was like, I mean, okay. And then rereading it, I'm like, no. I do not. Maybe just knowing who he was like, no, I don't want you to have these lingering looks, Donna. You won't become an angler fish. Is that what she called it? But yeah, I didn't hate him, you know, but it was interesting.
Yeah,
See, I think I went through.
Sorry. Are we going in a circle? I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
I would just quickly say, I think I went through the same saga that Jess went through during the first read. Every other page, no, he's cute. Wait, no, but he's no. It's like, oh, but like, you know, it's not all his fault. No.
Yes. Conflicting.
I think in a way, Jamie is experiencing a similar thing that Donis is experiencing, where she feels pulled between two worlds. I think that Jamie, because he does not have his identity in his people, tries to find his identity in being an FBI agent and utterly fails at that because he's so desperate to be loved. So I think that at the end, Donis made a really wise choice. That is my thoughts. Go ahead, Kim.
I don't. Why was Jamie awesome? Like, honestly, I didn't like the romance. I mean, it was just so fast, and I wanted to hear more about her. Like, just hearing how geeky she was, a geeky native. That is not a cool thing. When you're on a red school and you're a geek, you're not cool. Well, maybe you can pull it off if you're like athletic like how she was. But man, it was just really cool hearing. And then all of a sudden, ooh, the way he looked at me, I just hear my heart flutter. And I'm just like, oh man, like for real, like and it wasn't. I kind of wish that it maybe developed that way at the end of the book, and it was all friendship first. Because I don't know a lot about this guy. Well, obviously because he can't share anything, but I feel like maybe if there was friendship there instead of romance, that he could talk more about his background, like where he was from. Because I know with indigenous communities, because of the Indian Child Welfare Act and all of that stuff, like a lot of the times indigenous kids get adopted out of their communities, and sometimes they aren't placed with other native families. They might end up going into a non-native family or typically a white family. So a lot of the time we have these lost generations or lost peoples. And I was like, oh, I wonder if it's headed there, you know, because he wasn't you don't hear a lot about him. But I was just like, no, oh man, this is happening. Oh, okay, I'll just read it. But Jamie was complex in a way that, like what she said at the end, where why don't you stop absorbing all of these cultures that you're jumping around into, because he's a BIA officer, and you need to find out where you're from. You need to find your family. So I feel like I wish that was said like in the beginning of the book. I think it would have made for a lot. But this was a romance that I was like, man, I don't feel good about this, because he was in a position of power, and it didn't sit right with me. I was like, no.
I think that the power dynamics is actually something that Angela did really well in exploring, because there is always this realization that Donis has throughout the entire book where she's like, oh, I am the only one of us out of the three of us in this situation who actually cares about the people in this community. And she does realize, oh, my if I don't do this, like my people are being taken advantage of. And so she recognizes that power dynamic. My son's calling me on the other side of the door. Just ignore him.
Poor baby.
He probably just wants me to change the TV from Blippi to Blue's Clues. So
It's
Dad
totally
can do
okay.
that. Dad can do that. But I feel like that power dynamic and that realization was so powerful from Donis because especially then at the end when she realized like Ron knew that when she was assaulted that that guy was not going to get prosecuted most likely. Ron knew that and he should have made it a point to talk to Donis about all of that. You know, he told her, "Oh, you should pursue becoming an enrolled member. That way you can be of help to our investigation." But he did not say to her, "Here's what happens to you if something happens to you when you are an enrolled member." And that was him taking advantage of her. So I thought that that was, I appreciate that she didn't like outwardly express all that and wove that in as sort of like an undercurrent. The way that she wrote that in was so smart, and I love this book.
Yeah, same. Or even with that, when she's thinking about when they first are approaching her, like to work with them, and she's like, you know, after all this is done, y'all have to leave. I'm still here. These are people, this is my community. I care about. So just thinking about all those different things, like how she's recognizing that. And then like you said, like because she's like, y'all are just looking at it at the crime. I'm looking, like she looked past that. She's like, I see a whole person and I know that they've been through this and maybe they did do this thing wrong, but you're only looking at this one aspect of them. Like I know these people as people. And I really loved that, because usually in like a mystery or thriller it really is just looking at the fault of someone, which usually is like they do a bad thing, but that people are just more than one bad thing, or you know, some bad actions.
Yeah. Hi, Brie. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. You got to read it. It's so good. Somebody
amazing.
mentioned earlier about Levi, and this is where it's going to get into spoiler territory for sure. So Levi, we find out was a major player in all of this. How did we feel about that? The second time around, it hurt worse. But do we feel like that was in character for him? Do you feel like the author wrote that from the beginning and made it clear that Levi was a spoiled child, sort of who kind of always got his way and did
I
things
felt
his
bad
own
for
way?
him.
Yeah, or do you feel like it was sort of out of character for him and you kind of sympathize? Or somewhere in the middle? How are we feeling?
I think Levi's character was like a really effective demonstration of lateral violence and internal oppression within any community. And sometimes the people that we love the most hurt us the most. And what was really cool about it is that he's made him into this complex character because he does care about his sister and he has this love for her. And I think he just got lost, like a lot of our, like, because I can think of people within my own community who have lost their way. And most of the time you can trace those things back to either privilege or trauma or just along that whole spectrum. And I feel like Levi, he um, also was taken advantage of.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's another thing is like, I think being able to have someone basically pinpoint all these people, especially on their res, because they could jump that border. And when you're talking about borders, you're talking about like crazy multiple jurisdictions and identity politics and all kinds of stuff. But I think also with indigenous communities, we or I guess I can speak for myself, but we really are don't want to kind of fall down this slippery slope of being defined as always poor or always. And sometimes we make really shitty decisions. I know I have, like, in order to survive. I mean, you're recording this, so I can't tell y'all what what I've done to basically make it to the next paycheck. And sometimes we kind of buy into that whole capitalistic idea of what success is. And whereas you compare something like Donis, she recognized how important that the value of indigenous knowledge, language, and family, those things were very much irreplaceable. So I think sometimes someone like Levi, I think they're really easy to prey upon, especially when you may have lived your whole life with nothing. So I feel like that was, but I really enjoyed his character because it was complicated. And I couldn't, when she was in his house, remember it's like that whole area where she's finding out all of this stuff, like her accounts. And I'm like, what is going on? No, it can't be Levi. It's not Levi. But I was just like flipping through those pages. That was pretty intense. Yeah, it was crazy.
My heart was like, even the second time, I was so anxious. Yeah. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah. The second time reading it, I was just picking up on little things about Levi. Just like, I feel like the first time I read it, I was like, no, can't be Levi. And not like I still was so shocked the second time, but just I could see how that could be part of his character, because he is naive and spoiled and maybe doesn't take things as seriously as Donis does. And so I just reading it second time, just picking up on little things that he does, like even in the beginning with like the party and like how Lily's like, he always makes it about him. And I just think even though him and Donis are like really close in age, she is definitely way more mature than he is. And obviously have had different experiences with the experience with her mom and dad versus him. And then, but it still hurt because I just was like Kim said, like, I know he loves her, but it's like, why? But I didn't feel like it was like left field either. Like, it hurt me.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it.
No comment.
It was pain.
That's all it was.
Let's see. With Levi, I felt like it was a good look at lateral cyclical violence. I'm trying to remember just how much of a role his mom played in the bad decisions he was making. Yeah, so she had been a part of it. I think she was using her power as a judge also to control this crime, this series of crime that was going on. So I was heartbroken even the second time when she had roofied Donis. I was just like, why, Dana? Why?
How dare she?
I was surprised, but Levi, I didn't guess, but I didn't believe he would endanger his hockey career for this harebrained meth scheme. Like the meth scheme wasn't even that well planned. See, I think that the thing about Mike was that Mike had money and power, and that sounded really good to Levi. He was like, all right, well, if Mike has more money and power than me, then obviously if I go out this plan, and if I bring Donis into it, I have even better chances of this being a good thing for me. And I think that we can't underestimate the position that just trying to survive puts us in, like being desperate like that to make a good life for yourself and have money and security. Not that it justifies what he did, certainly, but
yeah,
I can kind of understand being young and scared and just wanting to survive. So,
and wanting your own because wasn't it always like Donis would like give him money when they would go on trips, and I don't know, it could have been like, I want my own money, or like, I'm a man, I want to make money for myself, or who, I mean,
Yeah,
who
but what
knows?
factors do you think like a paternalistic mindset or not a misogynistic mindset played in this book? At any part, not just with Levi.
Gosh, well, I know, like, even, I mean, because all of it was from, what is it, first person from Donna's perspective, and even
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
to be a community. So, like, my reservation is so rural. We don't have any cities near us. We're pretty isolated, and we're actually surrounded and landlocked by a whole nother reservation. So it's like we don't have a whole lot of contact with like non-native or cities unless we go into a border town. But even her playing, remember her microaggression bingo?
Yeah.
I feel like racism that close to what they experience, and those attitudes was constant. Like, even though the tribe is a sovereign nation, now has because of the self-determination laws and all that stuff that took place, and then now tribes were able to create economic businesses which were successful, which include casinos. And then white people, right, determining, saying, oh, native people shouldn't get per capita, and basically being awful and racist of how we spend our money, and how even the tribe chooses to take care of its community and not keep that money within the government, but chooses to spread out the wealth to people who need it. And yet we still get all this horrible racist treatment. So I feel like some of that really played out in this book. And Angeline Bolley also like highlighted the internal native politics that took place, which was blood quantum and enrollment, which is a very complex, messy issue. If you're like in a room full of natives and you start talking about blood quantum or identity politics, oh my goodness, it is not a fun room to be in. And I mean, but at the same time, sovereign nations, right? They have the right to determine how they determine citizenship. But then that comes with a whole bunch of attitudes and prejudices. And of course, with Donis, right? Her being biracial, that too. So it's like, yeah, super messy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Oh, wholeheartedly, because there's always that one person that's like, no, you're from this and you're only, and I'm just like, no. I don't want to. It's like when it gets when blood quantum and everything gets all like brought up, it's just a whole, it's just like I'd rather not with you. And we only really talk, like me personally, I only really talk about that with like very minimal people, because it just brings up a lot of like, you're not enough definition of like what it means to be native or what it means to be indigenous. It brings up a whole plethora of issues.
Yeah, and then you're like getting it from both sides. You have like Donis. I imagine she's white passing, right? So I bet she has a whole bunch of non-native people saying she's not native, and then including her own community saying those things. And so it's probably, I feel like, that paternalistic attitude and systemic way of the United States telling us that we have to determine that are native, we have to prove that we are this or whatever. So it gets really messy, and I feel like that identity politics plays into a lot of what was going on with this book, what was going on with Levi, even his mom, and it was all over. Even the elders, like, even though they would kind of like playfully joke about it, I feel like joking and humor is just a way to kind of like ease the tension, but it's
Mm.
really, I think a lot of humor is unfortunately based on a lot of fact that we experience as people of color.
Yeah. Speaking of the elders, I loved that they ended up being the hero of this, and that they ended up banding together and creating a
Their
group
cell
chat.
phones.
The cell phones. I loved that they Adonis really could not have done any of this without her elders in her
Mhm.
community. So yeah, if you want to all like speak on the importance of that or any parts that sort of stood out to you. Yeah, I agree. The elders were that. Yeah, this book would not have been this
They were
book without them.
amazing and funny, and I loved because I feel like, well, often in books that are written for a young audience, usually adult figures are absent because, for the sake of the plot. But I like that so many were present in this story, and I'm sure that's a huge thing in indigenous cultures and lots of different cultures, the respect the elders, like taking the time to take her to the center, down to the res. And I just liked all that time that she spent with him, like the one part where she's talking about one of the elders got an iTunes gift card. It was like, I can burn you a CD. And just all of that time, or even her time, that the complicated relationship she had with her mother's mother, Grandma
Mhm.
Mary,
Mhm.
even taking the time to go over there every day. So I just thought that was, I don't know, I just love that appreciation or that respect that she showed
Same.
for elders in the book.
Yeah, because elders do play like a really like based on where you are and how you're brought up, like elders take they're a very prominent part of your life, and like the way that you are taught, if you're taught more like traditionally or non-traditionally, either way, like it's always like you respect your elders. They're the ones that get to eat first, and then it's the middle age people, and then it's the kids, and like um the way that you're supposed to treat them and talk to them, and like there's some of the things that you see now and you're like, oh my gosh, I would never talk like it's the way that you're brought up, and the way that you're treated is the way that like you treat your elders with like such a higher respect, and like they look out for you and they love you even if you're not even related. That's your like your role as an older person is to be good to the children, and then their role is to be good to you as well. I know can probably speak to that too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, all that stuff.
She's like, I agree.
It just felt
Yeah,
so warm.
I think,
Warm
Yeah.
as
yeah,
Yeah.
and it was okay. So when I sometimes read like indigenous literature that's not written by a native author, they elders are romanticized as this mystical thing, as this stoic identity that they don't laugh or smile. But that is so not true, as you guys can tell from it's just nothing but jokes. It's always teasing. And I think there's a level of respect there that because they're like the living embodiment of, because a lot of indigenous cultures, like my own, are oral. Um, the languages, the ceremonies, the traditions are passed down through oral tradition, and the actual doing of of things, and how ceremonies play out. It's not written in a book, or we don't have classes on it, or it's something. And usually elders are almost our first teachers,
Yeah.
other than the mom in the house, which is like why I really enjoyed this book, because for Hopi people, the head of household is always the mom, and we call those roles of our women in the home, our mothers, as we call them firekeepers. They're the first to wake up, the last to go to sleep, the last to eat, the last basically they're kind of like the foundation of a home, a mom or the parent. And so elders, teach us those things. And it's usually not the moms that I learned those things from. It was from my uncles and who are way older, who taught me this is your role, this is my role. And but I think one of the things that that was really cool about this book is that they don't romanticize what an Indigenous elder is. They're just like people like the rest of us, and just as funny. And I think what Angeline brings to this book is just humanity. That yes, we have problems and challenges like like many people and communities across the world, but I think where she doesn't make us caricatures, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I loved that the elders were not, like you said, not romanticized, but also they were whole people on their own. They felt like they actually exist outside of this book, all of them. Like I loved that not only were they Donis's rescuers, but also they were just funny. Like I loved that Grandma June would compare the menus of the different senior centers and decide which one to go to based on who had the better food. But also, she was very smart and would say things like, you know, some boats are meant for the ocean and some are meant for lakes. And Donis is like, yeah, I agree. And I have to figure out which one that I am. I love that. I love that she had these well rounded relationships with these older people who she had so much respect for. I don't feel like that's something that we see a lot in YA books, like Jess mentioned. And I think that a lot of that has a lot to do with a culture of whiteness that does not really have the same regard for elderly people. Let's see. The elders are the raunchiest ones. They have some stories.
Didn't Grandma June at one point say like my greatest lover was an accountant or something?
Yeah.
I love that. I love that at the
This-
beginning, Lily asked Donis if she had told Grand Mary about not going to U of M, and she's like, "So did you do it?" And Grand June says, "Hope you use protection." I
So
loved her for that.
their lines were so good. On the with the characters feeling so real and like I thought even just the depiction of like Donis and like her friends and like her auntie, like they did drink and they had parties, but she was also smart and she was also an athlete and she took care of her cousins and respected the elders, but still maybe kind of told a little lie to her mom that she was like, it was realistic for that age. And then there's the adults, you're like, well, you know, you usually people do have that like one that cool adult that they can tell they're like, all right, I know you're going to be doing this, but at least be safe. And I love that she had that with her aunt. And then just I was like, this is realistic. You know, kids in high school aren't all perfect and they're not all bad. They're complex young humans
Yeah.
who do all these things. And I'm like, this feels real to me. And I think that's why I love this one so much, because often I feel like, why, I don't know, they just don't feel, they feel like a character instead of a person.
Mm,
And Donis and all the people in the books to me felt like real people.
yeah.
Yeah, I actually I related to Donis a lot because of the fact that she takes such a like even in the like you know spending time with her cousins and like um me as a person, I've had to take up like a matriarchal role at a very young age. I think I was like 7 when I changed my first diaper, started watching all of my little cousins, and you know eventually they became little cousins, and now I call them my little brothers and my little sisters and my nieces and my nephews. And you know, and she was so smart and she had like a really good head on her shoulders, and she had all of these expectations not only from like other people but like for herself, and she somehow was able to like juggle some of this, like not seamlessly but like you know everybody makes mistakes, but like I just like the fact that she was able to do all of this like in tandem.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree that the character work was phenomenal. Um, yeah, I really think that a lot of, in fact, a lot of what we see that are common tropes, I think in just the YA genre in general, I think can be tied back to white culture. But the adults have, oh, this is an ongoing conversation. Just kidding. Okay, somebody mentioned Aunt Teddy, and I wanted to kind of talk about what was the importance of Aunt Teddy in this story. I'm talking about people who feel like they, exist outside of the book. Teddy for me feels like she was based on a real person for the author. So, what do we think is, the importance of Aunt Teddy?
Oh, Aunt Teddy is the one that like keeps you in line, and I love that. Yeah, she yelled at her, but like it was purely out of love and out of worry, because like Kim said, like it's easy to go down like this slippery slope of like first you're doing this and then you're doing that, and then the next thing you know you're playing out some kind of stereotype that people have of Native people. And um Teddy was a symbol of like strength and um resilience and courage. And she was so smart and like very knowledgeable, but also like don't mess with her because she will come after you. She will yell at you.
Yes,
Yeah.
she will put
And
you in
like
your
I have so
place.
many aunts that are just like that, where it's just like, oh, everybody's like, oh my god, like your aunt is so nice and she's so sweet. I'm like, yeah, she's nice and sweet, but like don't make her mad.
Don't cross her. Yeah. All of that. And I also just feel like she was just another safe place for Adonis, and not she wasn't like some like pushover, but it was still was like a place where she could still just talk about more things that were going on with her as a teen, even if they weren't like everything. She was just like, I felt like a good example. With her, she was a health, she like worked with the health part of
Yeah.
the res, and but with Donis and struggling because she wasn't a member, and her conflicting feelings with that, like the blanket party, her wanting to go, and she's like, I want, and she's also like a bigger connection, of course, to that her father's side of the family, and of course she like wants to encourage that, wants her to be around, but also is like wants her to, she can also check her, I guess, like your privilege. Like when she said that, she obviously said it out of anger, but she's like, I also want you to, if you don't have to get involved in these things like we do, like don't, like I want you to be a part of, your families on the reservation and stuff. But if you can, certain benefits that are afforded to you because you're biracial, like I want you to stay out of some of the messier side. So
Hmm.
she was everything. I loved her. Everyone needs an Aunt Teddy.
Agreed. And there's like this strong respect between both of them.
Hmm.
Like she'll check you. It's like, okay, but this is why.
Yeah.
And we don't always see adults that are willing to, especially in like fiction. It's like you have the adult that'll check you or yell at you, and then you're a child. You're in a child's place. Move on.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I love Teddy. Teddy's my queen.
Yeah. Yeah, you could almost say that it was, rather than chastisement, it was guidance. It was firm guidance, but it was guidance done nonetheless, rather than just being like, you did a bad thing or you're doing stupid things. It was,
or I said no, you're not coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a conversation instead of just a no and then, like stay out of grown folks' business. She was like, wanting to let her know why.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said about reminding Donis of her privileges, because I think that Aunt Teddy is a great way by which the author sort of navigated nuances in the story. So obviously Donis did have privileges that Teddy's, Indigenous and Black daughters are not going to have the same privileges. And so she reminded Donis of that, and Donis was like, oh, I was not thinking about that. And so Teddy, I feel like, really helped the story navigate through these details that because you're in Donis's head, you're not seeing them. So Teddy was there to remind not just Donis, but you as the reader, what you might not be missing. Hi, Delphi.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was kind of like
Yes.
missing in this book was another perspective. And then I mean, not Jamie's perspective, but
Not you.
but maybe even like just a few people or even just one more on the other side so that it's not like spoiling the thriller mystery of what's going on and the who did it. But so I'm still struggling to rate this book because okay, I had this conversation with my daughter, so I read it first and then they read it and they're like, "Mom, the body shaming in this book. Why?" And I
Yeah.
was like, it's 2004. So, like, do you think mommy, because that's kind of like around the time I grew up. I don't want to tell you how old I am, but that's like around the time I probably graduated high school. And, yeah, so I was like, do you think maybe back then they had these attitudes about like our bodies? And she's like, that doesn't matter, mom, because this book was written like last year. So she was really upset. And my daughter is of course a native teen. And then my other daughter read it and she had the same attitudes. And she was like, why? Why does she think this way about herself? Why
Yeah.
is she saying these things to herself, mom? She's so smart. And I bet she's really pretty because that Jamie guy likes her. So, so I'm just like, okay, I think I need to rethink my rating on this book because when I read it through again, those parts were just like, ugh, like it would hurt me. And I'm like, why? So I think that part was just kind of like, but
Yeah.
but then the what I saw like in terms of cultural strength, I learned so much about Sault Ste. Marie, and even I would get uncomfortable with certain things just because of my own personal indigenous Hopi beliefs. Like when they were talking about the funeral stuff, like that part bothered me. I was like, I'm not supposed to, I feel like I'm not supposed to be reading this, you know? So, but then at the same time, I really appreciated those things.
Yeah.
Those real minute details that she would throw in there, like what South meant, what this meant, even just a little bit of storytelling about Raven and those little things just kind of making its way into the story. And I feel, and then that part was so strong. And it was just like, wow, 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 wow. But then this part, I was like, oh, man.
Lots of the funeral part I thought was because obviously I've said I'm not indigenous, but with the days of like on the I think the second day with like the Day of Atonement, and so I found those I don't want to say like interesting because I feel like that's really like gazy, like ooh, and this is so. But I mean, it's something I just don't know about. So all of those are what she did with like the tobacco right before her run. Like I just was like, I just like these parts of the story. The parts with the body shape are like her thoughts. I just love it. But I'm like, I mean, at that age, and you know, she's tall, which I'm not tall, but I just love that the portray because I feel like in normal books they're like not petite but maybe smaller and just average. She's like tall, athletic, no boobs, big booty. I was like, all right, girl. And obviously you're gonna have those thoughts like, dang, I don't, she's got this and I don't have those. So I feel like I was like, this feels realistic to me, but I can see how it could be, you know, you don't like that if you read it. But I felt like it was on brand.
I feel like I agree with both because I think that it was normal for her teen years. I just wish that again Aunt Teddy would have stepped in and been like, listen, your body is perfect the way it is. It has carried you through your life and we have to be grateful for, you know, the way that we are. And I wish that, you know, that sort of would have been addressed within the text. So I can understand.
Yeah, and I know her mom said something to her grandma. I think there was a part where her grandma commented on Donis's body, and then her mom gets pissed. She's like, "You never get to talk about her body ever again." And I kind of wish there was a little bit like more of that, because that is a conversation I had to have with all my kids, and just like the way you are is how like creator meant for you to be, and all of that is beautiful. You existing in this space and thinking and having, putting your breath in your, well, you know how breath has water and it's going, putting your water out into the world, all of those things are really sacred things. So to exist in this space, and right now with me, like your little soul could have floated somewhere else and been way off in the middle of nowhere and not over here with mommy. So I was just trying to explain those things to them, and just and I know, like, and just say, I know you're probably gonna be, might have different feelings about the way people see you, but that's just because they're growing up in this world where body politics is not good. We all have this Western mindset of what a perfect body should be, what it should look like, and all these attitudes. And then at the same time, I was like fighting with myself of like, okay, this is a YA, like, and it's also in 2004. Like, what was I saying about my body in 2004? But I was like full of myself when
we were in
like,
low-rise jeans.
Yeah.
Crop tops that did not look like the crop tops of today.
Ooh.
I even had like halters and
the halter top.
I had my butt kind of hanging out of those. Remember, it didn't have a button. It was like a clip on the top of your trunks.
That's
and I'd be like,
right.
Yeah, and I'd be like,
what a time. Oh gosh.
See, that was not me. I was
with my razor,
all covered up.
Yeah. So it's I talk about that with my girls about how and it was because of just different issues that I've had and experiences that I've had, especially when in this book, because I and I say this all the time on my channel, and I say it like with the work that I do. I am a child survivor of rape. I am a multiple survivor of sexual assault. So I've been re-victimized of sexual assault. I'm a survivor of DD. So it's kind of like my mindset back then wasn't that great, but I couldn't control those things. Those things would happen to me, but I could control the way I look. I could be like, you know what? You're not going to rape me. So I'm going to do and behave all of these different ways, because that's how I can control what is going on. And of course, at the time, I didn't realize it was just all me responding to trauma and what had happened to me. So when I think about this book, and I think Angeline Boley purposefully, because you see all these girls going missing, right? And we could have caught the bad guy if we simply were looking into what was going on with these girls, right?
Yeah.
We could have, like, so I think it also is her speaking on another level to that women of color aren't a priority, but yeah, we're willing to go chase after those drug cases, and but we aren't willing to and I feel like this was a huge thing when I was listening to Bad Fat Black Girl, and Cecily Bowen talks about that, about sex trafficking and sex work, and how Black bodies and even brown bodies aren't appreciated because we're missing and going murdered all over this country. And even Mickey Kendall says that too in her book. I mean, I think she has a chapter dedicated to missing and murdered. And it was like, and then to see that kind of come out in the conclusion, if they just simply were investigating this chain of Indigenous women going missing, then they could have caught the guy. Like, so that is a whole nother thing that was, I was just so livid at the end, and it was like, oh my God.
Yeah, I agree. I think we can continue on and sort of build that into a question. So, how did we feel about the portrayal of sexual assault in this book? What was the importance of it, and what is the difference you think between other books that portray sexual assault and something like this? Kind of a big question. Sorry.
Yeah, that is it is a big question. So I was on the Avengers live show a couple days ago, and Cal talked about the way like their his arm, and then talked about Donis's arm, and how like how Grant like took advantage of her injury, and the way that she kind of like she was there but she wasn't there, and she kind of like disassociated from what was happening. And I was like, I was not prepared for that. Like somebody was like, oh yeah, this happened, like there's a scene with where this happens, and every time someone tells me that, I don't listen. But like I'm like, okay, and I'm like, but there's no way to prepare for that. There's no way to prepare yourself for, oh, someone is going to be assaulted or raped in this scene. Like you know that, but you know, especially when it's happened, like if you're reading this and it has happened to you, it is it's sometimes hard to look at, sometimes hard to read, but mostly it's like hard to mentally prepare yourself for, because you have to tap in, like you tap into me personally, I tapped into those memories of like it happening, and then being like, no, I don't want to think about that, which is like something that Donis goes through. Like, I don't want to think about the fact that this is happening or that this happened to me. Like I can talk about it later, like it happened, and it's not that big of a deal in my, you know, when I'm talking about it. But like reading it is a whole different, it's a whole different experience. And so it still makes me so mad that I saw the little itty bitty signs of like the way that he talked to her and the way that he was like looking at her, and it just made me so angry and uncomfortable, and just I absolutely irate. And he is just the most vile human. And it's hard to prepare yourself for, but like I really felt for Donis when that was happening. I was just like, this is awful, because then you know, it's such a blight on like your mental health and how you live your life, and like how the like choices that you make is all stems from like something bad that happens. But the fact that like you know, I feel like bad things happen a lot more than they should to Indigenous women and women of color, or people of color in general. And it's just like, this is just one of the things that happens, or sometimes like happens a lot more to some people than it does to others. And so it was really powerful, but also very sensitive.
Yeah, I felt like, I mean, it's never easy to read, but I felt like it was in line with what Kim was saying, with how his book was talking just about what happens to Indigenous women and women of color. And of course, just in general, on how so many men just feel like they're owed, or like, you know, that they're owed a woman's body, or that just the way they read situations and take advantage of women. And so sometimes I question if, like, if there's sexual assault in a book, like, is it necessary? I don't know if so I don't know if it's ever necessary. Sometimes I think it could be handled better. Like, and I think it was handled well in this book. Sometimes I feel like it can be kind of so I don't know. I don't know if I felt like, I don't know.
I was muted, sorry. Whenever I see that a book has sexual assault, I always compare it to the sexual assault in Ninth House, because that I think is the worst. I think that that is real bad.
So unnecessary.
So bad. How the main character takes someone else's sexual assault and makes it about her. I think that that was the worst thing. I have so many bad thoughts about it. So whenever I read a book that has sexual assault, that's always like, is it as bad as Ninth House? And where did this book go right that Ninth House went wrong? So I feel like this book did well in that it made it about how there was that whole tie-in with how the FBI had pushed Donis to become a tribal member and enrolled, and did not tell her that if she were ever assaulted that would be affected, that would be an effect on whether or not that her abuser was prosecuted. And I think that there were so many power dynamics at play there, and that really is what sexual assault is about power and control. And so I think that the author did well in that regard. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I think for me, I've read a one where assault didn't happen, but it was an attempted rape, and it was so awful. It was like very triggering. It didn't. I remember when I was reading the content warnings for this book, I saw that there was probably a rape that happened, but I do not like reading in books where rape happens just for the shock factor, just for a plot jump to make the story more interesting. I feel like in this story, it was to really contextually talk about the jurisdictional complexities that Indigenous women face, because this happened in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I was kind of thinking in this story is that during that time, Indigenous women were targets. We were prey because VAWA didn't get reauthorized until 2013, I think, by Obama. And in that legislature, Obama gave, I mean, it didn't extend to sexual assault, but Native communities were able to prosecute for domestic violence that were committed by non-Natives during that time. I mean, still to this day, we don't have that full on expanded jurisdiction to take sexual assault cases to court unless you're Tolowa tribe, which is the Tribal Law and Order Act, which you have to do all of these crazy things to basically say we have the intelligence, the Western intelligence, to try this in our courts. But even if you do that, for Tolowa tribes, you can only prosecute up to 3 years maximum for each, what do you call it? For each crime.
Yeah.
And it's maxed out at 9 years. So, and that's if tribal courts take that on.
Yeah.
But they have these things now called SAUSAs, which are special assistants to the U.S. District Attorney that can work within tribal communities. So they're basically kind of like a step down from the U.S. Attorney's Office. But that one is not so great either, because then the feds, what they'll do is they'll just push all these cases to these tribal attorneys. And and we don't have the resources to take on cases like that.
Yeah.
So it sucks. And then even now, you guys all go vote, please. Write your senators and tell them to reauthorize VAWA, because this next reauthorization, they actually included in there that for tribal communities to have jurisdiction over sexual assaults that take place by non-Native perpetrators on Indigenous lands.
Mm-hmm.
Also, even for, so for instance, if I am a Native woman, I live on Native lands, let's say I'm dating a non-Native, we live together, and let's say this person is hurting me physically, and let's say an officer shows up, witnesses everything, right? And then my perpetrator basically attacks the officer. So even that charge, we don't have jurisdiction over that. Even if my abuser hurts my kids during that whole time, we don't have jurisdiction over that crime. Even if it goes to court and my abuser attacks the judge, attacks the probation officer, attacks his lawyer, we don't have jurisdiction over that crime. So it's really basically a lot of injustice, and it's all racially motivated. It's because we're Native people and they don't think that we have the capacity to handle these crimes in our own courts. But our judges, our prosecutors are all law trained. They all went to law school. They all have to take the state bar, and they have to take the tribal bar. So they have to pass 2 different bars in order to practice law within our community. So, but yet we still don't have that authorization to handle these crimes within our community. So it's very frustrating, and it is something that I do in my work. I don't have a lot of people in the U.S. Attorney's Office who like me all that much. I think people are just like, "Oh God, this woman again." So it's very tiring work, but it's also very necessary, right? So.
Yeah. All right, 2 more questions. So first one, in what ways did this book succeed or fail at being intersectional in its feminism? So how did it do with intersecting with, issues of like race, class, gender, stuff like that? I love when I get questions. I do questions that make people think first.
I'm like, I mean, she talked about a lot with, I thought, with Wildonis being biracial and not living with her mother who was white, and having, it was interesting because she knew so many people who, like, well, they had what did they call the money that they got from the per capita, or like, and she knew people who lived in the before and the after, so people of various levels of class. But then she had a trust fund, she had all these things, she had all that money that was available to her brother. So that was an interesting, different, like, to see, because I feel like sometimes in books where there is like a character of color, not always, but sometimes they're usually of, they don't have a lot of money or stuff. So it was but she still was like responsible with it. She would like go out and buy a car and do all these things. And then also with her being, yes, she had her insecurities, but she still was like, she was really smart. She was athletic. She was on the men's hockey team, and like compassionate about her family and all of these things. So I think it touched on colorism, which I didn't even know or thought of as a thing before reading this book in Native communities. I didn't, but just talking about like her, she's more like white passing, so she can cross the border into Canada fine, versus like her aunt or her aunts, well, her uncle and cousins who are Black and Indigenous. And so I think I'm not like the law of intersectional feminism, but she definitely touched on a lot of topics in this book, and for the most part, I think she handled most of them well, to me.
Yeah, I agree. Anybody can go.
I was like, wow, that is a loaded question. That would have been nice. That would have been nice to figure out earlier, so I could be like, I feel educated. But no, I really liked Donis as a character. I also like some of the consideration that she had for her friend Lily, and like thinking about her. And maybe sometimes she was a little bit absent in like looking at like some of the like the bigger picture regarding colorism, because she kind of was in her, they were kind of in their hockey bubble there. And so maybe that's, and it wasn't until her friend died that she was able to see outside of that, and she had to see outside of that and like look at the big picture and the big, like the after effects and things like that. But I think that it definitely succeeded in making you think about things and making you you know, explore certain themes and certain like aspects within yourself, like as a person. But I think maybe it failed. Well, for me, like, I know it's not supposed to be inherently masculine or have anything to do with masculine, but I feel like there wasn't a adequate balance of like yeah, she had an uncle and she had a dad, but like you know, I feel like they really failed her, like
Mm.
and not that's not saying that like I think that men should be praised in every single book, because like they should not. But I think that this really showed like how men fail, not only like women in general, but like women of color, or like, you know, especially indigenous women. Like sometimes you have like a whole network of uncles and dads and people that love you, and then there's like the other half where it's like you only have one, maybe like one or two people, like one or two men that have a modicum of like this much of a shit that they give for you. And but I really love the way that like you had like the mom and like Aunt Teddy and Grandma June and like all of these other like matriarchs that also were like standing up for you and like looking out for you.
Yeah.
And like even her friend Lily, who was like, you know, had experienced the you know what it means to be like more a darker native person, and like having to deal with like being followed in grocery stores, and what it's like to cross the border, or like just go do just to exist in life, and like the way that you're looked at as well.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
All right, Kim, Amber, any thoughts?
You're like the end.
I feel like everyone said everything so much better than I could have. I do want to say though, just to piggyback on the men in Donna's life, that's just something I personally related to. So like I felt that so hard. All of her deep-seated issues with her dad, I'm just like, me too, girl. Me too. So I don't know. That just hit home. That has nothing to do with anything. I just had to get that off my chest. I'm sorry.
No, I think
I related.
I think it does. I think
like 100%.
Yeah, I think that this book really shows the different ways in which men don't recognize their power and yet wield it and fail women and girls. So her dad is an example, Ron, the FBI guy, is an example, Jamie's an example, her own brother, her coach. Man, there's a lot of men that failed in this book. Holy crap.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to say that, but I'm not always good at saying what I mean.
Yeah, no, I totally understood. I agree. Yeah, I think that there were a couple of men, specifically her uncle, but obviously out of the two of them, Aunt Teddy was the MVP. And then the elders. So I really appreciated the elders, and also her ex. He was just trying his best and got scared off by her brother. So I think that there are men who are trying. The elders obviously are the MVPs here.
They need to do better. No, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, the men needed to do better by Donis, and I think that it's interesting in how all of the ways in which the men failed and the women had to step up for each other in the book. I think that that was a point that the author was trying to convey without overtly saying it. So yeah, I think that Donis's experiences with men were there to relate to. So you could see, yourself in the book. If that's been your experience, I've been there as well with my dad. And then see all the ways in which the women in her community, especially her elders, came out for her, but also Lily, and in her own capacity, her mom tried to step up for her as much as she could. So yeah, I can see that being like, where were the good men, but also yay the women.
I think I saw that too at the end. I was crying when they had that ceremony, which was really important to me because the Western form of justice, that punitive form, it fails us.
Yeah.
I think it fails all women of color, and it fails men of color as well. I mean, the fact that Mike, because he's white, because he has influence, because he has money, he was gonna get away with it. But people like her brother and possibly her friends, they were going to prison. So I feel like that was a pretty strong message at the end, and also what transformative justice and what healing could look like in the end. That we have our own answers. I mean, even with the blanket party, we have our own ways of dealing with things. I mean, I know there's stuff that happened in other communities. If you haven't read Winter Counts, y'all need to read that too. So
yeah, you do. It's my favorite book.
But that's a pretty amazing book about when systems fail us. We try to do all that we can to make up for those things, or to find other ways of healing, and even other ways to fight this system that oppresses us and turns us into statistics and just treats us like numbers instead of like people. Because we're almost victimized twice, or not almost, we are. When we're raped, when we're beat up, when we're targeted for violence by people in power, whether if that's police or rapists or perpetrators, we not only experience injustice at that time, but we also become re-victimized and dehumanized again in the system, which is and Jess, oh my gosh, we should discuss A Mind Spread Out on the Ground. I have so many things to talk about that book. You guys, Rachel, if you want to read a feminist book, you gotta read that.
So funny enough, it's actually on the list for next year. So if you want to come back and talk about it, I would love to have you both on to chat about that one.
Yeah, it's
So
such a good book. I feel like reading that book, and then I read Hood Feminism, I think before or right after that, or maybe I was reading it at the same time, and it was just them. It felt like they were having like a conversation. They were like, those are such two amazing reads. But in terms of intersectionality, I think the only like I didn't see there was no queer characters in this book except for her uncle, right?
Uncle, yeah.
And then again, like what Jess said, Donis is a privileged person. The fact that I mean, like me and my husband were having this conversation the other day with our kids, and like us talking about how we had no running water, we didn't have electricity, we didn't have food. Like when she's talking about commodity foods, like when my kids are asked, what the heck is commodity foods? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like my kids don't even know what commodity foods is. So and I think just having to wear the same pair of pants like all the time, and just so it's like to see that when I know that a lot of times we don't want to put Indigenous trauma and poverty on full display, but I feel like those stories are also really important to talk about, how that is very much a reality of our community. So I think reading about Donis was really awesome, especially then the Indigenous joy and intelligence was so awesome. It was amazing.
She was such a botanist too.
Yeah, and I was like, man, is this girl gonna turn into like Robin Wall Kimmer or something? Like I could
That's what I was thinking.
So I was like thinking that too. So it was cool, but I think they were skimming the surface of intersectionality, and like just do, but yeah, like but I feel like it spoke of I think, I mean, can you imagine if this privileged biracial white passing girl experiences this kind of violence? Can you imagine what a disabled Black, Indigenous, trans woman would experience in a world like this. So I feel like this is such a start to YA. I think my girls really enjoyed it because they're like, wow, mom, because that's all they read is YA. And then for them to read this, they were just like, it was really cool. And my oldest daughter, she's like, this girl is me. She's shaped like me. She looks like me, because my daughter's kind of lighter. And I was like, I think she's white passing. She's like, I don't know. I think she's me because she's smart. And so it was really cool to see them read something that reflects them.
Yeah.
So I think that was like a victory in itself. But I think I'm waiting for that like Black, Indigenous, trans fantasy romance badassery, and yeah, so I'm excited for.
Well, and you're also really lucky, Kim, because you see the way that your thoughts and your experiences intersect with your daughter's experiences as well. Like from you like being in high school and like experiencing 2004 with the razor phones, and then her being like the body imagery, and like you get to have this amazing discussion about the way that things kind of collide is amazing. I'm jealous.
Yeah, I had to explain T9 texting to them. It was
God.
so
No.
funny. T9 texting. She's like, Mom, because so my husband now, my spouse, my other half, we were high school sweethearts. So she was like, Mom, Daddy said he used to text you at school, but he wouldn't take his phone out of his pocket. What's that about? And I was like, that's T9.
Just knew them keys.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was so funny. She's like, oh, so it'd be like 1, 5, 6, 7. And I was like, yeah. And then you would just count like what letter it would be.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, what was the space? And I was like, I think it was 0. So it was so funny. It was, he even, remember how you could find a contact, but you just hold down, was it a number?
Yeah.
And it would go to their contact. Then he would go arrow, text, enter, middle button, and then he would text, and then middle button, send, or I don't know. But I would get all these text messages, and I'm like, how is he texting me? We're in the middle of school right now. And then he would show me. He's like, oh my God.
Texting inside your sweater.
Yeah.
You get the Columbia sweater with the pocket on the inside, so that way you can kind of just
Mm-hmm.
We had to make do.
We did.
My phone was so heavy. It was like this big. It was like a deck of cards. And then I couldn't put it in my pocket because this big stick would stick out. So when I sit down, it'd be like poking everything. I'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't put this in my pocket.
You just sneezed on me. Oh, you don't have to fake sneeze.
Yeah. But I remember when she was talking about those, what is it, those 2 or 3 inch clog sandal things?
Mm-hmm.
The platform flip.
Yeah. I couldn't afford those, but all my friends.
I didn't have any, but I remember.
Yeah, they had the Skechers, like the real thick Skecher ones. I finally was able to get like shoes. I got them from Walmart, and they're like white, but they had this big fat like sole. It was so funny. Yeah.
Okay. My last question, and then I will let you all go because we've been on for an hour and a half. Is actually Kim kind of touched on it. So I want to know, this is a book that I think all of us have sort of come back to and reread. Just ignore my kids, sorry. And I think rereading it after reading other books really changes the experience that you have with it. So what is a book that you would recommend reading and then coming back to this book after, and sort of like Kim said, like having a conversation between books? I think that Kim mentioned Braiding Sweetgrass is a great book for that, which is by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and it's about indigenous knowledge in botany and plants, and that's something that we saw a lot from Donis and her community. So I think that's I got a lot out of reading Braiding Sweetgrass and then coming back to Firekeeper's Daughter. So I would recommend that. But it can be like, anything, fiction or nonfiction.
Well, since I'm the only one that hasn't reread it yet, I am taking notes. You guys are all telling me what to read.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm excited for you to come back to it and then tell me what your second experience is with it.
I'll still be crying.
Yeah, I did. I sure did.
I think I'm ready. Okay, so if you can handle it, because this one also does have sexual assault and it also talks about missing murdered Indigenous women. I have a video about this where I talk about my one of my relatives that was a victim of a very gruesome murder and rape here in South Dakota in the 80s. But if you can handle it, there are it gets very gory and violent, so it's not a horror, but it is kind of like a thriller, introspective. This and then also Winter Counts. This one also has death of a child in this one. So
that's why I haven't read it.
No one warned me about that one, so I was like, oh. But I have a thing on my highlights where I talk about like the exact chapter and like the page count, the page number where it happened, so you can happily skip over it. Because if you, I asked David, I got mad at him. I was like, bro, why did you put that in there? And he was like, because it happens to people and it was something that needed to be talked about. And I'm like, yeah, but like, no. So this definitely, because it also talks about vigilantism and the way that like the system fails Indigenous people and like Native people, especially those like that are more in impoverished areas, because this takes place on Rosebud, which is like, I don't know how, maybe like an hour or so from like Pine Ridge, where I'm Oglala Lakota, but David is Sitranu Lakota, but this I was like made me think about so many people, and also like talks about drugs and like addiction and things. So like if you read these two and then you read this, it's like a huge difference in like perspectives.
Who is the author of Bone Black?
Carol Rose Golden Eagle.
Carol Rose Golden Eagle?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna put it in the
and
chat.
This also has like some vigilantism as well, but it's like
in my own moccasins. Okay.
Huge.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I just spelled eagle wrong. Oh boy.
But like I said, it's really, they're very mature reads. So
yeah,
I'm gonna have to
look out for yourself.
Get that, because Kim mentioned, and then the comments also, Mind Spread on the Ground is so good, so good. A book. This is not an Indigenous book, but I feel like it has similar themes, and it would be Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby, because it takes a look at another group in queer people that the system overlooks, and Black queer people, and then it is like a vigilante story. That was incredible. I don't know if how that would change your perspective, but it's just something that I think if you like this, you may like that. But also, yes, read A Mind Spread Out on the Ground, because it's phenomenal. And yes.
I think Kim has one.
I have a whole bunch.
Yay! I was hoping you would.
No, I'm just kidding. If you're looking for a nonfiction, what Jess said, Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott. But I also double read that with Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall, which was an amazing read.
So good.
Ooh. Yeah, I feel like they really complemented each other, and it felt like they were going back and forth and just saying some really powerful things. If you're looking for a well, it's kind of like a crime thriller mystery, but it's the second book, and it's Girl Gone Missing by Marcy R. Rendon. Marcy R. Rendon is an Indigenous author. The first book that she read or that she wrote is Murder on the Red River. So this is the second book, but I heard I'm actually going to be reading this month. If you're looking for a literary fiction, I would recommend Louise Erdrich's The Roundhouse.
Yes, I love Louise Erdrich.
Yeah, so that one also has a sexual assault, but it also really takes a deep dive into rape trauma and the kind of like the complexities of jurisdictional complexities, non-native perpetration against women of color, and but it's told from different perspectives, and one of them is actually her son, and the dad is actually a tribal judge, I believe, and so that one's a lot, many content warnings for that one. I was like bawling. But it's also, there's a lot of like kind of interweaving of culture and native humor and just like native perspective of what it's like on a reservation, and kind of like those nuances of identity and kind of like class sometimes within indigenous communities. And so yeah, so I think there's another Winter Counts too is another, it's a good one. I think it kind of focuses more on the thriller aspect, but I think the character of Virgil, he's interesting. He's a complex character. So if you like complex characters, I think that one's going to be having a second book pretty soon too. I can't remember what he said the title was going to be, but that one is another one to look out for.
He does have like there's a crime anthology that there's another Virgil story in, but I can't remember. Neil has it.
Yeah. And then if you like memoirs, indigenous memoirs, I suggest In My Own Moccasins by Helen Knott. That one was holy crap. That like just slapped me across the face. Talks about like a woman's struggle with substance abuse, but as that is a way of how she deals with her trauma and things that have happened to her in her life. Heartberries by Therese Marie Myatt. If you guys like stream of consciousness, kind of like that poetic prose, it's lots of trigger warnings and content warnings for that book as well. But it's such a powerful read. I think that one is like less than 100 pages. And then also, yeah, I mean, I could go on and on.
Kim always has the book recs. I love that. All right, a cat, please. Ma'am, get it together. My lord. All right. I think that is it. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, everybody in the chat, for coming to hang out with us and chat about this wonderful book. Everybody's channels. Okay, buddy. Yep. It's ouch. For that. Everybody's channels are linked down below, and next month we are reading Caliban and the Witch by Sylvia Federici. So looking forward to that. Thank you all for being here. I super appreciate it, and we will see you next time.
Let's all go follow Jess to her next discussion.
Yeah. What are you doing, Jess? Isn't this like your third live today?
No, the next one will be my third.
Oh my lord.
Live stream palooza. It's a party.
All right, go check out Jess's channel. It's linked down below to watch her live show. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Have a good night.
Bye.